Lord, yes, papi, hit me one time and make it funky.
I was brought up and told to have no bed. I was brought up and told to have no bed. I was brought up and told to have no bed.
Welcome to the Full Circle Podcast. I'm glad to report that we've put the band back together. After a little absence, we have the oral historian back with us. We got the OG, Dr. Neil Holmes. And today we have a special guest. He's, I'd say a friend of the show. He's been with us before. And when he was on before, he presented so much information that I had, some of the comments I received was, you need to have him on again. So here we are, we have him on again. Welcome, brother Maurice Carney. Welcome, brother.
Hi, it's a pleasure. It's good to be back with you, Dan.
And we wanted to have you on here again. We were going to have you regardless, but then especially with this week being Congo week.
Yes.
And I want to talk about that. That's going to be our main, the main gist of the show today. But one thing I think I'd be remiss if we didn't discuss the death of General Colin Powell. And one thing I want to talk about, we probably going to address this a little differently because, I've always had some respect for Colin Powell. There were some things that, I looked at it kind of sideways. Actually, when I first realized who he was, and he was with the Bush administration, Father Bush, and I couldn't stand that administration. So at that time, I wondered, how could a brother be in such a high position in that administration? I was young. I was, in the militant stages. I guess I'm still in the militant stages. And, then I saw some interviews and I, developed some respect for him and his accomplishments. But OG Dr. Holmes, I want to start with you because when we were on a previous show, when we were talking about, I believe we were talking about the effects that the withdrawal of the United States government in Afghanistan and the military forces there, how that was going to affect Black people here and how that was going to affect the continent. You had shared something that General Powell was involved in, and I'm not here to dog him out. This is just something I want to talk about. You had shared something he was involved in, I think in Vietnam, and you were saying that sometimes we celebrate the wrong people. So not to be insensitive to his death and, respect to him and his family, but could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, well, there are several things I think that we need to think about when we think about Colin Powell. And again, I'm not one to kind of like cast aspersions on the dead and that sort of thing, but some of these criticisms we raised when he was still alive. So,
absolutely.
So we want to, just elaborate, let people understand what we were saying last time. There were at least four things I think that give me pause. One was the My Lai situation in Vietnam, the My Lai massacre, when you had close to 160 or so civilian villagers killed by this U.S. forces, and he was asked to do a investigation, and he did a very cursory didn't find anything, of course, and that kind of kept the wraps on that situation, but it still came uncovered. Then there was another situation in Panama when they U.S. went after Noriega, and we had maybe 6,000 to 8,000 civilians, Black folks primarily, who were killed just to get that one man. You send in a military to do a police job, and the reason for doing that job is even more problematic. And a number of people who were killed were people of his own Jamaican background, because you had a number of people from Jamaican background who lived in Panama, had gone to Panama for jobs. And, then we see, the media talks a bit about Iraq, but even prior to Iraq, there was Afghanistan. And the question was, what did the Afghanistan situation involved, and he was the one who said it's war, and which meant that you send in the military. He didn't even consider police action or whatever. And I think the other thing, and I think Maurice can talk about this much more, is that who helped to train him. The person who helped to train him, in many ways, had a direct connection to the Congo, and as far as I know, and someone who had a very bad history in terms of the Congo. So I mean, you know, since the death of King and shortly thereafter, you know, when King was alive, King put together this domestic movement in this country, what many people call the civil rights movement. And he married that movement with a very strong movement against US militarism abroad in Vietnam and elsewhere. He demonstrated for Mandela's freedom back in 1964. He was in Ghana, he supported Nkrumah in Ghana. And the Black Power movement, which came after it, also did the same thing. But many of the people who wrapped themselves in King's, you know, memories, or, you know, today do not follow the King program in terms of his international approach, especially his approach against militarism. And we hold up people as long as we get you know, anything award. I mean, if we get an award from the Academy Awards, it's a great thing, as opposed to our own award system. If we get something from awards from the US military, it's a great thing, as opposed to our own awards for doing great things internationally. So I don't want to take up too much time, but that's you know, it in a nutshell.
You know, what's interesting with General Powell, and probably most people that I know, and you all could probably speak to this, most people that I know that went into the military, into the United States military, didn't necessarily do so because they love their country or whatever. They just kind of, it's a job, you know, and they went into it as a career. And I think in the case of, you know, General Powell, he was just able to rise high, and, you know, just like in any other corporation, you know, it's going to be some that rise to a certain level, and he just rose to a certain level. And, you know, it was interesting. I remember when, again, I don't want to take up too much time either with this. I want to get into the Congo week discussion. But I remember when he came out, you know, he was a staunch Republican, but then he came out and endorsed Barack Obama. And I remember thinking, okay, I guess at some point we all come back home, you know, so I was happy to see that, you know, at that time. And it's not like I feel like Barack Obama did so much or whatever. It's not about that. It's just that at the time he had an opportunity where he saw that this African-American man could ascend to the presidency, and he stood up and spoke up. So, you know, I was proud about that. But then, Dr. Holmes, definitely some of the things you talked about, you know, I just look at with pause, but, you know, just like with anybody, I don't necessarily agree with everything they do or say. But I do agree that sometimes in this country, we celebrate the wrong people. And sometimes we don't look at it, what it means for our community, and we just follow suit, you know.
David, taking off on that, even though Colin Powell is a homie in Jamaica, talking about celebrating the wrong people, very good friend and comrade of mine, Obi Egbuna, he wrote a play, a conversation between Colin Powell and Kwame Ture. Both of them coming from the Caribbean,
Right,
and laying out the tracks that they followed. I think even you know, being schooled in New York, and he had the mass emphasis play, children's play. He had the children do a play on the two of them, basically speaking to the question of who we should celebrate, who the genuine heroes are, who the liberation heroes are, who the heroes that are presented to us. And in fact, I'm going to share. I hope this YouTube works. I'm going to share it with everyone, if you don't mind. If people
Not at
want
all.
to look into this, it's a play, very instructive and informative. I think people can benefit from. But interestingly enough, Professor Neil, that it was in the when we were at Akron, right? I don't know if you, of course you remember, when we were at Akron in 1990, I think it was, we were organizing with the American Foreign Service Committee and other folks to go to Washington. Actually, that was my first march on Washington. It was against the first Gulf War.
Right.
That was my first resistance encounter with Colin Powell. And what was fascinating that came out of that Gulf War under Bush 1 was that Powell was celebrated for his ruthlessness, right? And how he said, we're gonna, I don't recall the exact quote, but we're gonna trap them, we're gonna cut their heads off, right? That's a term that he, right? I think that's a term he used, right? In speaking of the Iraqis. And it was because of his performance, right, during war, that he was elevated to a whole nother level of national hero, to the point where he could be seen as becoming a president of the United States, right? So I think it speaks more to the United States as a warlike nation.
Right.
Definitely.
Where that's how you become, that's how you ascend to the highest level, or one of the optimum ways anyways. So I just do recall that it was from the first Gulf War, when we were organizing at the University of Akron and with folks at Cleveland, and we traveled to Washington to protest against the war that Colin Powell was leading. So that gives you a sense of the side that we're coming from in that in that scenario. But for him, even as critical as we are of Powell, you just have to the way you see how the system used him, even somebody as powerful as himself. He was basically, in the end of his career, used as a stooge, right? To his credibility was spent, right? Not by him per se, but by Bush 2, the George W. Bush administration, where he went in front of the whole world, right? And he put his credibility on the line, and he brought these vials and he showed it, that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, and he saw the evidence. He sat down with the CIA, evidence that we haven't seen to this day.
Right.
So he was a flashpoint for exposing the methodology in which the U.S. goes to war. The U.S. goes to war and maintains its empire and builds it on lies, right, and propaganda. And he was used in the end, anyways, for those who had eyes that could see and ears that could hear, he was used to expose the U.S. lies for going to war. And they continue to go to war built on lies. So if anything, we should get an education from that in terms of the average person out there, so that they can see how it is that the U.S. Moves around the world to exercise dominance and really just kill people.
Right.
Because wars are about killing. That's what you do. You go to war to kill people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, before we get into Congo Week, Dre, I want to come to you. I know you've had a distinguished career as a journalist. I've seen pictures of you interviewing Jesse Jackson, other figures. Have you ever had any contact with General Colin Powell?
Never had any contact with him. Mostly the soldiers who were under him during the Gulf War. And what's interesting is I remember when the Gulf War first kicked off, everybody was talking about storming Norman Schwarzkopf. There was this white 4-star general whose you know, oh, he's leading the march, he's leading the charge in. And then all of a sudden it was like, well, Norman's going to retire and his replacement is going to be this 4-star general. And that's when the world, well, at least my generation, when we came to know who Colin Powell was. And it was one of those moments where it was like, wow, somebody who looks like us is actually a 4-star general, not recognizing the fact that this wasn't the first 4-star general that we've ever had in the military that was Black.
Right.
So it was interesting talking with soldiers who were over in that Gulf War, and we're like, you know, it was interesting knowing that there was a Black person in charge. You know, we did not agree politically on things, but it was still somebody we could look to. So that was the only interaction I'd ever had anybody was close to him. And, you know, I just remember watching TV and seeing him, and it was almost Barack-like, you know, here's this smooth talking, you know, non-controversial, you know, that at that time, Black guy that's on TV. And as he got later in life, you know, listen to some of the things he said and see some of his writings. And it was almost like he had a moment of reckoning where it was like, okay, I made this mistake, this mistake, this mistake. And I think it was more profound when he came out against Trump. And he had mentioned, you know, his actions, you know, Trump's actions. And it was in that same ilk that he said, I have made mistakes. And that's how I know that this is not the right person for the country. So it's like he had his moment of reckoning before his passing. And I don't think that should be forgotten either.
But you know what? It will be, because it's the same way America takes someone, they extract what they want from him, and then that's what they promote. You know, like no one talks about Martin Luther King. Go ahead, Dre.
No, to that point, and I'm glad you said that, because as a former journalist, when I first got word that he passed, I was traveling and I was turning the TV on, and at this particular hotel, it's set to come on Fox News. So that in itself, I was like, great, I know what part of the country I'm in.
Right.
And the first thing they said was he died, and it was from complications of COVID. And this is when you get into the politicization of things, because it's like, okay, he died of complications of COVID, that's it. But nobody meant, within that same news article, that session that they had on air, nobody talked about him having a compromised immune system because of cancer treatments.
Right.
So what it is like, you know, yeah, he's fully vaccinated and he died. So it's that evoking the sense of fear in people, continuing to use the media to do that. And that in this country has always been the thing. White women will always be the people who are the victims. White men will always be the scholars. They will be the leaders, the movers, the shakers. And the Blacks continuously will be the angry ones, the violent ones, the ones who are going to cause agitation. And it's like, here we are using Colin Powell's death to further stir the pot in a political sense. And I just didn't like that. It was one of those things where it's like, let the man be dead. And then of course, the orange one comes up the next day and issues his statement. And you begin to see what Colin Powell meant, why people who follow him are the reason America continues to be where it is today.
Right. And, you know, like I'm saying, it's like they will extract what they want, like what they did there, extract what they want, and that's what they promote. No one promotes that Martin Luther King wasn't talking so much nonviolence after like 1965. They don't talk about the Poor People's Campaign. You know, it's just, if you become too militant, they say, well, you're going against everything Martin Luther King said, you know, and they still try to make Malcolm X, which is funny. And Dr. Holmes mentioned this in a previous show, that now he's becoming more mainstream. But for years, they didn't talk about when he went to Mecca, you know, and came back and had his reawakening. That no, that just was not talked about. And of course, we could go on about this for all night, but we got our guest, Brother Mo here, Maurice Carney. It is Congo Week. Brother Mo, why don't you tell us a little bit about Congo Week, what it is, and what it celebrates, what it does, and how people can be involved with it.
Sure. Thank you. We're Friends of the Congo in the 14th annual presentation of Congo Week. And Congo Week, established in 2008, was an effort, or is an effort, to elevate the profile of the Congo, to bring the Congo into the consciousness of the global community, the world community, and to provide a platform for Congolese to showcase their talents, their skills, their expertise. And it's a centerpiece of Congo Week is what we call Congo in Harlem. And that's where we bring Congolese filmmakers, musicians, artists, practitioners, activists, you name it, to Harlem for a week of activities around the Congo. It's inspired because there's just so little said about the Congo, so little known about the Congo. And throughout the 500-year drama that we've experienced coming out of the 1400s, Congo has been a central, how can I say, a central element in that drama. You know, we talk about the trafficking of Africans from the continent to the Americas. More people came out of the Congo than anywhere else, any other region, even West Africa, which is a conventional wisdom. If you look at UNESCO studies and Emory University slavery database, you just type in Emory University slavery database, they have maps and everything where they document the bulk, 4 out of every 10 Africans that were extracted from the continent, that were trafficked, came out of the Congo region, not modern day Congo, but the old Congo Empire. We're talking about stretching from Gabon, even Equatorial Guinea, Central African Republic, right on down to Congo Republic, Democratic Republic of Congo, Angola, in that region. We saw Congo being center stage in those hundreds of years of enslavement. And then when you come up to the colonization of the continent, Europe's latest foray into the continent, 1800s, the Berlin Conference, it was also called the Congo Conference. And Congo loomed large in that it wasn't colonized initially, but it was given to the King of Belgium as his own personal property. And there we saw really if you want to call it, I don't necessarily like to use the term genocide because it's a legal term, but you want to talk about the loss of life, the tremendous loss of life. An estimated 10 to 15 million Congolese lost their lives in a 23-year period coming out of the Berlin Conference. So we see, and we hadn't seen anything like that, that scope, that scale of tragedy since the enslavement of Africans, right? And then even if you come to today, from 1996 to the present, an estimated 6 million Congolese have lost their lives as a result of the pursuit of the wealth of the country. And the United Nations itself says it's the deadliest conflict in the world since World War II. But these tragic periods, it's not in the consciousness of people, right, in our minds. So that's why we say we're breaking the silence Congo Week to bring to people's consciousness the onslaught, the 500-year attack that's been made against the African continent by Europeans and this capitalist system, and Congo bearing the brunt of that attack, right? It's an attack on Africa writ large, but Congo has paid that Congo region, what we call Congo, paid the dearest price. So Congo Week attempts to shed some light on that in terms of the tragedy that's unfolded in the Congo, which we argue is emblematic of the tragedy that's unfolded on the African continent as a whole and among African people worldwide, right? And then on the other hand, we talk about that just enormous potential that exists in that place we call the Congo, arguably being the richest piece of real estate on the planet in terms of natural resources. Economists on the Business Insider said there's an estimated 10 trillion or $24 trillion worth of natural wealth in there, and that's not counting the forest, the pharmacopoeia, the Congo River and its tremendous hydropower, and it's certainly not counting the most important resource, the 90 million Congolese the overwhelming majority of whom are youth. So these two elements that are emblematic of the continent as a whole, the tragedy and the potential. So Congo Week aims to bring that forthright into the minds and consciousness of the globe, world, but particularly African people. So that's the essence of Congo Week, and people want to find out more about it, they can go to congoweek.org. It's a week of activities that takes place every third week in October. This year it's from October 17th through the 23rd, even though we'll be having some events beyond the 23rd, but the bulk, the meat of the events will be taking place in the 23rd. And each year, the Atlanta wing of Friends of the Congo, they've started commemorating, giving awards to African champions. Last year, they gave an award to Dr. Denis Mukwege, who won the Nobel Peace Prize a few years back. And this year, we have a very special award that will be given to one of Lumumba's children, his daughter, Juliana Lumumba. We're going to give her an award for her indefatigable struggle to secure justice and dignity for her father, who was assassinated by Western powers, Belgium, United States, and a whole coterie of them. But it was the Belgians who snatched Lumumba's teeth after they assassinated and chopped him up, his body, and put it in acid. The Belgian soldier took his teeth, one of his teeth, and the family is trying to get that back to the Congo. And Juliana Lumumba has been the forefront of that. And during our presentation tonight, I will play a short message she recorded a message to African youth. I'll play it tonight. I don't know if I have the capacity to share screen. If I do, I will.
Let me see.
I will do that and share the message from Juliana Lumumba with the audience.
All right.
I do. I see it. I have it. Okay.
I just made you a host.
Okay, great. Fantastic. So I don't know if you want to see it now or we get into it a little more.
I'd like to see it now, but I don't know if Dr. Holmes or Dre, if either of you had any questions you wanted to ask before we proceeded with the video.
I can hold mine.
Yeah, I'll wait till the video.
Okay.
All right, so let's see what we can do here. So this is Juliana Lumumba, and it's voiceover for translation purposes.
Okay.
Greetings, dear students, dear friends from Africa, Africans, and Afro-descendants. Today, we're talking about Africa. And as you know it, in the United Nations, we have 6 regions today: the North, the South, East, West, Central, which are the traditional regions, but they have added the diaspora, because it is very important, not only in its number, but also due to the financial support that they send to Africa, and also that the diaspora support that they send to Africa is very important in the public help support. What do I need to talk about here? Because we see that African societies do metamorphosis, and African youth has dramatically changed within time. How? The youth are now more politicized, but unfortunately not well supported, because the level, the rate of unemployment is very high. But they are very connected, and these youth do not tolerate what their forefathers, us, went through. Why and how? African societies, when we talk about Africa in general and how they've taught it and how they talk about it in history books, is that this Africa starts only from the trade, black trade, and colonization. We all know well that Africa, according to our own references, we have to know this, and we know it, and we have to teach it, that our roots went back as far as our forefathers' civilizations. Of course, with the beginning with the pharaoh from Egypt, the Meroe, the Yupi, the Napata, the Congo Kingdom. We also have the Songhai Kingdom, the Timbuktu, the Mali Empire, the Zulu Empire, the Ghana, the Kao, the Lunda Empire, and so forth. And when we look at all these histories, we go beyond what we have been taught, meaning we go up to 4th and 5th century, well documented. It is not only about the Berlin Conference, because Africa was not born at the Berlin Conference. So we need to take possession of our past to better create our future. We need to change the status of victims imposed on us, of those who need help and assistance, to that one of fully actors of their own histories and development. It is our African responsibility, and particularly African youth, to change the current course of things with the willingness to give to our countries an economy which is created, which creates wealth and employment. We are capable to do that, because the continent, and when I'm talking about the continent, I'm talking about our black world and Afro-descendants, have all the competencies in all domains, intellectual, economics, artistic, government organizations, religious organizations, national and international organizations, syndicat, all with no doubt have to play their role, collectively or individually. We have several assets for a change which brings hope and sustainable development. What do we need then? We need to ask real questions and fight real battles. Let's think about our own development with an approach which does fit our own cultures, which does fit our ancestral values, which are universal values that we are proud of, and also that one which fits our progressive society development, looking at our past, so that we can get to concrete results with global innovative solutions. We can do this together with you, youth. Like you said it, we need to change our software. We seek to be in charge of our own destiny, to master our present and build the future. The biggest asset we have in Africa is its youth, it's you. We will all work together toward its enrichment. So I'm telling you today, let's try, let's try, let's try.
Hey, I appreciate you sharing that with our audience.
Yes. No problem. That's we just had that come in yesterday, actually. The team was able to work on the voiceover and get it out. So we're glad to be able to share it with you. In the tradition of her father, the father had a speech called Appeal to the African Youth. And here it is, we have the daughter today appealing to the African youth, not just on the continent, but beyond. And yet another reason why we'll be commemorating and celebrating her this Saturday. We wish we could have done the same for her mother. We missed that opportunity, but we made sure that we weren't going to miss the opportunity to let her know that we see her. We recognize the struggle that she's fighting, continue her father's tradition of pursuing justice and pursuing a free and liberated Congo, free and liberated Africa. And I'll share the link in the chat. People would like to join us this Saturdays from 12 to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where we'll have her. She'll be live this time. Hopefully, she'll be able to engage the audience, but at least she'll be present to receive the award.
So she'll be there in Harlem?
Well, she'll be with, everything is virtual now. So she'll be in Kinshasa, and we'll be piping her in over Zoom from Kinshasa.
Okay, great. So Dr. Holmes, Dre, you guys had questions, comments?
Well, my first question is, you talk about the problems in the Congo, the 6 million dead and whatnot. But, Black folks in the US, we have some of our own problems, quite a few of us are dying and economic issues, homelessness and stuff. Why should we be concerned about what's going on in the Congo? What's the link between what's happening to us and what's happening there?
It's a really good question. And, there's so many links. And that's not necessarily a new question. Thanks, Doc, for that question. It's a question that's been asked for decades. And the best answer, one of the best answers I've heard, come from Malcolm himself. As many of you who are tuning in may know, Malcolm was a staunch Pan-Africanist and established an organization of Afro-American unity. And one of the initial forums that he was doing in Harlem, he was supposed to show a film on the Congo, and have a speaker on the Congo. They had some problems with the film, and people in the audience were getting, restless. So apparently one brother asked, so why are we focusing on the Congo anyways? We have the problems here in the United States with a man. So Malcolm responded and he said that as long as you think you have to get Mississippi straight before you get the Congo straight, you'll never get Mississippi straight. And the reason why he said that is because Malcolm was clear that the same forces that have us catching hell here in the United States are the same forces that have people in the Congo catching hell. If you think they're different forces, then you haven't properly analyzed the problem. Same captains of industry in terms of capitalist forces. You have political domination. The US is an empire, and it's not just a question of dominating the United States, dominating Black folks in Black and brown people in the United States, but Black and brown people globally. We just talked about the wars that the United States have fought. It's mostly against, almost all against people of color throughout the globe. So white supremacy isn't something that is contained by the US border. It's a global phenomenon that people in the Congo are subjected to, people on the African continent are subjected to. And there is no other nation on the planet that practices white supremacy and exports it like the United States does. So what Malcolm was talking about with those forces that result in Black folks being brutalized in the United States, being imprisoned disproportionately, being shot down by the police, disproportionately. It seems almost like a regular occurrence every week or so, or something like that. And so that comes from a devaluing of Black life. That Black life is not valued. So that means that it's okay for you to have substandard education. It's okay for you to have substandard justice. It's okay for you to be railroaded into the prison industrial complex because you're Black, you're African, just like there are Black folks and Africans on the African continent. So we're not as separated and disparate, and the problems are not as separated and disparate as one may think. So those are some of the reasons, anyways, why I think that problems are not separate. And if you really dig into it, if you look at folks in the United States, we're living a colonized reality. That colonization that took place in the African continent continues to take place under neocolonialism. Is not fundamentally different from the experiences that we have here in the United States, and whether in urban communities or not. Just about everything that Black folks have access to is substandard. I just ran down the litany, the education, the health. We saw it come front and center in this recent pandemic, coronavirus, that we were catching the brunt of it because we were on the front lines in the grocery stores and bus drivers and getting the least resources to protect ourselves from the virus. So that's the conditions, the system, the systematic oppression and repression, the systematic dehumanization is not different whether you're in Richmond or Virginia or Washington, D.C. or in Kinshasa or Kisangani, DRC.
Very good answer. Definitely. Dre, did you have anything?
Yeah. So early on, you had talked about what would be categorized now as genocide. And it's interesting because the case of what happened in the Congo was part of a class that I had some years ago. And it's funny how when we talk about genocide and we talk about the Armenians and the Turks, and of course, the first term that comes to mind when we talk about genocide is, what happened to the Jews. And a lot of people don't realize that that's more of a contemporary term that was developed in the 1940s. But genocide has been going on for years. And you say genocide when it comes to the people, and I'm just going to call it what it is, raping a nation of its natural resources. There have been billions of dollars that have been built out of the Congo into American companies and still going on to this day. When you talk about the Congo in this present day to individuals, and you mentioned situations where the number of Congolese that were killed by way of genocide in the country, what's the reaction you get from people when you bring forth this knowledge? Because it's something that not everybody knows. And again, when you throw the term genocide out there, first thing comes to mind, oh, the Holocaust. But before the Holocaust, there was our cost. And a lot of people don't realize that. So how do people react and respond when you bring that forth?
Yeah, well, to answer your question directly, people don't know. They're shocked, they're surprised, they're like, really? And that really ties back a little bit to Professor Neal's question, because the life of an African is so worthless to white power system, to white supremacy, you can have millions of Africans die and people don't know. You know, they just don't know. I just can't imagine in today's world, millions of people dying in Europe and folks don't know. I mean, millions of people died in Europe in the 1940s and people are still talking about it today. They're building museums to it, even in places where the genocide didn't happen, right?
Right.
Everybody is chipping on that bill to pay back reparations.
Right, chipping on that bill, and for the descendants, they make sure they carve out a nation. They kick out a people in Palestine and carved out a nation for the descendants of these folks who were basically attacked by fellow Europeans, right? So that's people just don't know, right? So and I use the term. I don't even know if I use the term genocide. I'm reluctant to use it because I really, interestingly enough, I don't think it really captures what has happened to Africans, because when you get down to it, genocide is really it's not a political term, right? It's a legal term. It's a very specifically, narrowly defined legal term. And when you look at genocide legally, it doesn't apply to what happened to Africans, right? You know, at all. So I'm trying to, some of our scholars wrestle with a word and language to describe it. I know Sister Marie Carney talks about the Maafa, right? In order to describe what has happened to Africans. So we really have to come up with a terminology that captures, what you said, Dre, in terms of the plunder, because it's a combination of things, right? It's plunder of natural resources, it's plunder of human resources, it's enslavement, right? It's forced labor, it's mutilation. So there's this whole litany, right, of atrocities that have been committed against African people that genocide really doesn't capture. Even if we look at the Congo today, we can say, well, 6 million people lost their lives. But what are those people who didn't lose their lives? What kind of conditions are they living in, right? They're living in bestial conditions, right? They wake up in the morning trying to forage for food in a land of plenty, right? Because they've been caught in a death trap, a quarter century of a death trap. This is actually the 25th year of the launching of the wars of aggression against the Congo by African stooges backed up by US military, US money, US intelligence, right? When Rwanda and Uganda invaded Congo in 1996 and again in 1998, that triggered the loss of millions of lives. And then after that, they sponsored militia groups inside of the Congo. And when international institutions try to bring them to book for the mass crimes, the crimes against humanity that they've committed in the Congo, then you have Uncle Sam running interference, right? Like at the International Criminal Tribunal on Rwanda. They said, well, don't investigate the crimes committed by Paul Kagame. And if you do try to investigate the crimes committed by Paul Kagame, Carla Del Ponte, we're going to take you off the board of the International Criminal Tribunal. How dare you look into, because he's our guy. He's our proxy in Africa. He does in Africa what we don't necessarily have to do directly. So don't touch him. So even as the International Court of Justice says Uganda owes Congo billions in reparations, they let Kagame slide. And he's and Rwanda and Uganda, their soldiers fought each other inside of the Congo, right? Over minerals, killing Congolese. So that to circle back to your question, what people say is that they just don't know, because the lives aren't valuable enough for them to know. The media, the corporate media that the overwhelming majority of our people subscribe to, is not sharing it. That's why shows like yours is so important, because we have the time to really get into these matters of life and death and humanity of Africans. So folks they just don't know, and we try to educate them, not only on the loss of life, but the forces behind the loss of life and the conditions that people are living in today, which is just unbearable, unthinkable. human beings to be subjected to the type of beast-like conditions that we see in the Congo. And these are folks who quote unquote survived.
Now, Brother Mo, as we, when this airs, it may not be enough time for people to totally get immersed in this year's Congo Week, but you mentioned it earlier. For our listening audience, before we close out, could you give us the website one more time? And I want to make sure that I post it into, when we post the video, I want to make sure that I post that in the resources. What's the website?
Sure. The website is congoweek.org, congoweek.org. And I don't know if we have a little time before we close for me to share one more video with you. It's about the same length, about 4 minutes or so.
I think that'd be perfect. We can close with that.
Okay, so you have Juliana talking about, the next generation and speaking to the youth. And I just want to leave us on a upbeat note about the Congolese youth and how it is that they've imbibed, they've absorbed the message from Lumumba and are committed to fulfilling on his Pan-Africanist ideals and principles. So I wanted to share a piece with the Congolese youth in their own words, letting you know that the struggle for a free and liberated Congo, a free and liberated Africa, in the spirit of Lumumba, lives on to this very day in this generation and for generations to come. So let me do that and see if we can bring that up.
All right. Let's roll it.
Promesse aux frères des races de rélever la tête, de regarder en face un avenir qui promet la délivrance. De richesse, de grandeur, c'est désormais tienne. De richesse, de grandeur, c'est désormais tienne. Du soleil des faits dans un ciel sans couleur. Une chaleur étouffante, des crayons brillantes. Désert de ma terre, même lutte des ancêtres. Martyrise la tyrannie, risque de le mettre. La terre-mère, terre que tu portes au cœur. Le tifra du Congo, le terre prospère.
On a tous deux droits, on hausse tous nos voix. Qu'elle soit faite la justice.
Au nom de la justice.
À quoi qu'on c'est courant, debout au même rang. On réclame la justice.
Au nom de la justice.
On a tous deux droits, on hausse tous nos voix. Qu'elle soit faite la justice.
Au nom de la justice.
À quoi qu'on c'est courant, debout au même rang. On réclame la justice.
Oui, descendre, c'est parti à tous les vents du ciel. Et tu bâtis jadis les temples funéraires où dormaient les bourreaux d'un sommeil éternel. Poursuivis et traqués, chassés de tes villages, vaincus en des batailles où la loi du plus fort. En ces siècles barbares de rap, de carnage, signifiait pour toi l'esclavage ou la mort. Tu t'étais réfugié en ces forêts profondes où l'autre est mort, qui était sous son masque fiévreux, sous la dent du félin ou dans l'entrée du monde. Et froide du serpent, écrasant peu à peu. Et puis s'en va les blancs, putain, plus sournois, putain, plus risé, putain. Et rapace qui échangeait ton or pour de la pacotille, violent tes femmes, et livrant tes guerriers. Par contre, ces vaisseaux, tes garçons et tes filles, le tam-tam pour donner de village en village. Pourtant, au loin le deuil, c'est mon les désarrois. Disons les grands départs pour les lointains rivages où les cotons et Dieu et le dollar roi, merde. Bin, yeah.
On a tous deux droits, on hausse tous nos voix. Qu'elle soit faite la justice.
Au nom de la justice.
À quoi qu'on c'est courant, debout au même rang. On réclame la justice.
Au nom de la justice.
On a tous deux droits, on hausse tous nos voix. Qu'elle soit faite la justice.
Au nom de la justice.
À quoi qu'on c'est courant, debout au même rang. On réclame la justice.
Condamné aux travaux forcés, comme une bête mon frère. Des lobes au crépuscule, nous c'est la misère. pour te faire oublier que toi t'étais un homme. On t'a appris à chanter les louanges de Dieu et ce divers cantique, un rythme à ton calvaire. T'es dans l'espoir à une vie et au monde meilleur. Mais ton cœur, créature humaine, tu ne demandes guère que ton droit à la vie et ta part de bonheur. Ta part de bonheur, Congo. Assis autour du feu, les yeux pleins de rêves et d'angoisse, chantant des mélopées qui disaient ton cafard, parfois joyeux aussi. Lorsque montait la sève, tu dansais et perdu dans la moitié du soir. Et c'est là que jaillit magnifique, sensuelle et viril, comme une voix des reins, ici de ta douleur, ta puissante musique. Les jazz aujourd'hui admirés dans le monde, forçant les respects des l'homme blanc, en lui disant tout haut que dorénavant ce pays n'est plus les siens, comme au vieux temps, comme au vieux temps.
On a tous deux droits, on hausse tous nos voix. Qu'elle soit faite la justice,
Au nom de la justice,
apparemment c'est courant, debout au même rang, on réclame la justice.
au nom de la justice,
On a tous deux droits, on hausse tous nos voix. Qu'elle soit faite la justice,
au nom de la justice.
apparemment c'est courant, debout au même rang, on réclame la justice.
Je vous demande de faire de cette 30 juillet 1960 une date illustre que vous garderez ineffaçablement gravée dans vos cœurs, une date dont vous enseignerez avec fierté la signification à vos enfants, pour que ceux-ci, à leur tour, fassent connaître à leurs fils et à leurs petits-fils l'histoire glorieuse de notre lutte pour la liberté.
Definitely appreciate you sharing that with our audience as well. And it kind of reminds me, as we close out, it just kind of reminds me of when Steps of Sonic, back in '88, they had a whole Africa album. They said AFRICA, Angola, Soweto, Zimbabwe, Tanzania, Zambia, Mozambique, and Botswana. So let us speak about the motherland. And it's just disappointing to me that that kind of hip hop has disappeared, but that's a whole nother show, right?
And maybe we can bring one of those young African musicians on with you to talk about the music in Congo and liberation music.
Hey,
so if you want to set that up, we can make that happen.
Hey, let's make that happen. And again, Brother Mo, thanks for joining us.
It's my pleasure, man. Thank you.
Sharing this with our audience. Hopefully, man, all of us together could really lift up this Congo week and, you know, make it part of the national consciousness. You know, like I said, by the time this airs, it might be too late for people to get involved with this.
Oh, no, it's not too late because people can go to the website. We put everything, we archiving all of the Congo Week events. So you go to congoweek.org, click on the calendar of events, and there's a link right there that says past events. You'll see all of the Congo Week. You see this year's events, even last year's events. So it's not too late at all.
All right, well, that's great. And we'll definitely put this in the comments of the video. And as always, thanks for joining us, brother. And we're going to have you back again.
Okay, my pleasure. Love to get back with you all. Thank you all so much.
Take care.
Thanks. Thank you, Professor Neal. Really appreciate you.
No problem. And that was that was a poem that Lumumba wrote to Black folks back in 1959, if I'm right.
Yeah.
That he was writing that poem to us on his way to take power in the Congo. And I saw somewhere he said that the Black folks don't have a problem in the United States because you can all come move to the Congo.
Yeah, I mean, he that wasn't just like wolf tickets, because that's how I know Dave Chappelle is in the news these days. And his mother was invited to the Congo by Lumumba, and she went. You know, Dave Chappelle's mother is a Lumumbist, and she's still living to this day. We had her as a part of Congo Week 2019. So Professor Neal, he was very real. He was up on Howard University campus recruiting Black folks to come back to the Congo. And Dave Chappelle's mother, Dr. Yvonne Sion, responded to that call by Lumumba.
And interestingly enough, when Dave Chappelle became disenchanted with his show, that's where he went.
He went to Africa.
Yeah, he went to Africa. So we might have to discuss his current issues in a future show.
Absolutely.
All right. Once again, brother Mo, thank you. Thanks for joining us. And I think you're gonna be like, I'm a fan of Dr. Boyce Watkins' show, and he always has Dr. Claude Anderson on his show all the time. So I think you're gonna become our Claude Anderson, brother.
I'm down. I'm down with that.
All right.
I'm down with that. Black labor, white wealth to liberation for Africans at home and abroad.
Right on, brother. Thanks. We'll see you next time.
All right.
All right. Take care.
Take care.
Lord, yes, papi, hit me one time and make it funky.
I was brought up and told to have no fear.